People think moving is just lifting heavy things and not breaking televisions. That's the visible part. The real job is stepping into strangers' lives while they're still warm. You learn the weight of their secrets: urns, hidden letters, closets they never opened. I've been a mover 6 years. I've seen roach nests, carried urns, found journals. Never once did I think anything was supernatural. Until the Thursday with the box. We were short a guy, so it was just me and Luis doing a back-to-back. A one-bedroom walk-up, then a storage-to-condo job across town. October sky like a bruise. The client, a teacher, had neat boxes labeled kitchen or books. 82 in total. I did a last sweep, slid the truck's door down, then stopped. There was another box. No label, seams wrapped in black gaffer tape instead of tan. Damp-looking cardboard but bone-dry to the touch. Heavy, 40 pounds at least. When I tilted it, the weight shifted unnaturally. "Yo, you had something?" I asked. Luis checked the list. 82. We're at 83. Inside it rattled faintly, beads, screws, or teeth. Beneath that, I thought I heard a breath. We set it aside. The client swore it wasn't hers. "Not mine," she said, almost apologizing. "Policy says unclaimed items go to the warehouse." I stashed it up front, and we drove off. When we rolled the door again at the next stop, the box had dragged itself forward. A trail of black fluid shimmered behind it, thick like syrup. A swollen drop clung to one corner, refusing to fall. "Gross," Luis muttered. "Something leaking." We dumped it on the curb, but when we loaded blankets at the next job, there it was, front and center, waiting. The tape looked crooked, like someone had peeled and pressed it back. I scored a big black X across the top with my knife, wrote the date and not client. We stacked everything else around it like it was an animal we didn't want to wake. Halfway to the condo, the truck thudded. We pulled over. Straps were tight. Dollies unmoved. The box now stood upright against the bulkhead. My X had shifted sides. The black trail curved across the floor like a slug's path. And then the whispering. Faint, almost words. Almost my name. Luis swore. "We're not driving this thing to a client." Back at the yard, we tried to dump it. But when I tilted it on the dolly, the whispers grew louder. A rhythm like language. We heaved it into the dumpster. Wet thud. Silence. Relief lasted 5 seconds. When we logged out, there it was again on the intake bay pallet, black trail ending beneath it. Luis chained it to the wall. We finished the day pretending nothing happened. But the smell stuck to me, sweet, metallic, clinging to the back of my nose. Luis skipped our usual goodbye and peeled out. That night, on my apartment stairs, I saw wet smears along the steps. The carpet outside my door was darker in a straight line. Inside smelled normal, detergent, garlic, coffee. Until I rounded the corner. The box was on my rug. My X was gone, replaced by dark, soaked lines. Beneath it, the carpet pulsed like breathing. The whispering filled the room. I sprayed it with cleaner. Drops beaded, then deepened the rug's color like dye, not water. I called the cops. They came, sniffed, shrugged. "Improper disposal," they said. "Have your company pick it up." One told me not to touch it. Neither looked it in the eye. I called dispatch, got only a hiss, like breath in a phone. I hung up when it shaped my name. I wrapped a moving strap around it, cinched tight, lifted like training said. It rose, almost willingly, as if it liked being carried. The whispering sharpened in my ear. I brought it to the dumpster again. Rain slicked the pavement. The box left a black smear like a signature. I set it down, whispered, "Stay," and turned away. The latch clicked behind me. I don't know if it was the door arm or if something followed me inside. I showered, lay on the couch, left the TV murmuring. The pipes whispered back. That night I heard footsteps in the hall, my neighbor's creaky board. Except she was out of town. By morning, the black trail ran from my door toward the stairwell. The box sat outside by the dumpster, exactly where I'd left it, but the rain hadn't washed the dark away. It had spread. I quit that day. Told dispatch I had a family emergency. Which wasn't a lie. I am the family. The emergency is me. I moved apartments. Hired a different company. Left half my things behind. But in the new place, the toilet water shivers when the tank is still. The closet smells faintly sweet and metallic for exactly 10 seconds at a time. 3 nights ago, the nurse next door knocked to introduce himself. He apologized for night shifts, said the hours make people move strange. He had kind eyes. While he spoke, I heard faint whispering from behind his wall. Last night I woke for water. The carpet in my living room was darker by 1 shade. In the center lay a flat space where a box might have sat, pulsing softly, like something breathing in its sleep. And when I leaned down close enough to hear, it said my name. Most people think foreclosures are the easy jobs. You walk into a dead house, pack whatever's left, haul it to storage, and lock the door. But the truth is those houses still breathe. You can feel the arguments in the walls, the decay in the furniture, the air that hasn't been moved by real life in months. I've cleared out a lot of them, and I thought I was used to it. Until the night we went to the house that wasn't empty. It was me, Luis, and Dom, our weekend guy. 2-story colonial, quiet street, one of those neighborhoods where every driveway looks the same. The bank had repossessed it months ago, but someone finally signed the order to strip it and stage it. All the utilities were cut. No lights. No heat. Just dead air that tasted like dust when you opened the door. From the beginning, it felt wrong. The front hall was stacked with mirrors. Not hung, but leaning against each other in crooked towers, some cracked, some shattered into spiderwebs. They were smeared with black streaks of something like soot or ash. In their fractured surfaces, we didn't look like ourselves. I bent to shift one, and my reflection was grinning while my real mouth stayed flat. I didn't mention it. The living room was worse. A card table in the center with half-burned tarot decks scattered on it, their edges singed. Pages of spiral notebooks covered in symbols I didn't recognize. Circles, triangles, jagged spirals drawn over and over. The air smelled faintly of something metallic, like burned wiring. Luis shook his head. People are freaks, he muttered, but he wouldn't step past the threshold. Dom started bagging the papers, but when he turned one over, the back was covered in Polaroids. Children's faces. Some smiling, some crying. Each photo nailed straight into the drywall with rusty nails. The nails weren't random. They formed rough circles, as if marking points on a map. And when we finally found the actual maps in the dining room, they had the same circles drawn in red marker, right over neighborhoods in our city. I didn't want to touch anything else, but we had to finish the job. The upstairs was stripped bare, just mattresses on the floor and more mirrors, their surfaces warped. It was the cellar that broke me. The concrete floor had been split open with a sledgehammer, chunks of it piled in the corner. The raw earth gaped like a wound. From that hole sat a bag, massive, bigger than a man, wrapped in layer after layer of black tape. The kind of tape movers use for furniture pads, except this wasn't neat. It was frantic. It looked like someone had bound the bag until their hands bled. And still, it had leaked. The tape bulged where dirt stuck to it. The smell was thick, sweet, rotten, chemical all at once. We circled it like idiots, none of us wanting to be the first to touch it. Dom, being youngest, finally swore and grabbed it by the end, muttering something about bonus pay. Luis and I helped drag it toward the stairs. It was heavy, sagging in the middle like a body bag full of wet sand. Halfway up it moved. Not shifted from our pulling, no, it jerked violently, like something inside had slammed against the tape. We dropped it instantly. It tumbled halfway back down the steps with a sound like meat hitting tile. I froze, because the shape under the tape had twitched again. Not random. It flexed. Like muscle. The three of us just stared, waiting for it to go still. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears it drowned everything else. And then we heard it. A muffled sound from deep inside. Not a voice exactly, but a vibration that could have been words. A groan that pressed against your teeth like pressure in an airplane. Dom backed into the wall. Luis said, "Nope," and bolted for the stairs. I was the last one out. I kept my eyes on the bag the whole time, even when the tape began to split and something pale pushed against the seam. I didn't wait to see more. We dropped everything, mirrors, maps, photos. Left the house open. The bank could deal with it. When I climbed into the cab, Luis's hands were shaking on the wheel. Dom sat pale in the back, refusing to speak. None of us said a word until we hit the highway. That night I dreamed of the bag. Not the house, not the mirrors, just the bag, pulsing like a second heartbeat at the foot of my bed. I woke with my teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. A week later, I drove past that neighborhood on another job. The house was boarded up now, plywood across every window. The bank must have sealed it. But on the curb, by the trash cans, sat a black bag bound with tape. Smaller than the one we'd left. Just sitting there like it was waiting for the next set of hands to drag it inside. Movers are given a key to an old storage unit, instructed to deliver everything to a decaying house on the city's outskirts. When they slide open the door, they find rows of mannequins, all missing their eyes, surrounded by piles of missing person flyers. In the center sits a single item covered in a white sheet. When uncovered, it reveals a mirror so fogged that shapes move behind the glass, pressing their faces outward as if waiting. Storage jobs are usually boring. Old couches, boxes of tax records, the occasional crate of vinyl nobody wants. You grab it, load it, drive it, unload it. The dead weight of people's past lives. That morning, the work order looked simple: retrieve items from a unit on the edge of the industrial strip, deliver them to a house just outside city limits. No client to meet, just a key waiting at dispatch with a prepaid envelope of cash. We didn't ask questions. The unit was at one of those low-slung, rust-colored complexes, rows of corrugated doors stretching into the distance. Our key fit a padlock so corroded I had to kick it before it gave. When the door rattled up, the first thing we noticed was the smell. Dry mold, old paper, something acrid beneath it, like spoiled meat gone to dust. The light cut across stacks of cardboard boxes, none labeled. Piles of rolled carpet leaned in the corner. And on the far wall, dozens of papers taped in crooked lines. I stepped closer. Missing person flyers. Different faces, kids, teenagers, men, women. Most looked like they'd been photocopied and refotocopied until their features blurred. Each one had the same thing in common: the eyes had been cut out. Clean circles, leaving blank sockets behind. Luis muttered, "No way," under his breath and turned to go. But Dom pointed at one taped low to the concrete, near ankle height. The date on it was tomorrow. I wanted to believe it was a joke. Some sick prank with old flyers. But the air in that unit pressed heavy, like the breath of someone standing too close. We started loading, because that was the job. The boxes were oddly light, some rattling like glass inside. Dom shoved one and it split at the corner, glossy photographs spilled across the floor. Hundreds of them. Each one was the same pair of eyes, cut from the flyers, stacked and reprinted like trading cards. When I bent to scoop them up, I realized some were wet, ink smearing onto my gloves. Fresh. Luis kicked the box shut and barked, "Don't touch it. Just haul." His voice was thin, stretched too tight. We stacked everything on the dolly, wheeled it out. The unit door rattled shut behind us like it was glad to close. The delivery address was worse. An abandoned house at the edge of town, slouched behind a chain-link fence. Boarded windows. Weeds waist-high around the porch. Dom checked the slip again. "You sure this is right?" "It's what's written," I said. And because we didn't want to carry the boxes back, we went inside. The air was colder than it should have been. Dust hung like gauze in the half-light from the gaps in the boards. The floor groaned under every step. In the front room, we found more flyers, nailed directly into the plaster. Same cutout eyes. The walls looked like they were watching us with empty sockets. Luis set the first box down too hard and it burst. The photographs spilled out, scattering across the warped wood floor. Except these weren't eyes. These were mouths, gaping and blurred. Some laughing, some screaming. We didn't speak. We just dropped the rest of the boxes and headed for the door. But as we turned, we heard a noise from deeper in the house. A dragging sound. Slow. Heavy. Like a sack being pulled across rough wood. Dom whispered, "Tell me that's rats." Luis shook his head once. His jaw was tight. "Let's go." The sound came closer, from the hall. Then stopped. And then the wall beside us, the one covered in flyers, shifted. The paper bulged outward as if something underneath had pressed against it. A handprint bloomed through the layers, 5 fingers stretching wide, straining. That broke us. We didn't bother with the dolly, didn't bother with the gate. We sprinted to the truck, metal ramp clattering behind us. Luis gunned the engine before I'd even shut the latch. In the rearview, the house sagged smaller, just a shadow. But the flyers, hundreds of them, fluttered against the inside of the windshield for a moment before sliding down the glass, as if they'd been pressed from the inside. We didn't talk the whole drive back. At the yard, I tried to log the job, but the system wouldn't take the address. The screen blinked error every time I typed it. I left the sheet blank, stuffed it into the file, and locked the cabinet. That night, I couldn't sleep. When I finally got up for water, there was a flyer stuck to my fridge. Same blurred face. Same hollowed eyes. And underneath, fresh markers scrawled a date. Most house-sitter jobs are side cash with an attitude. Someone tosses you a key, says, "Don't scratch the floor," and ghosts you until the invoice hits. This one started the same way, man's voice on the phone, no name, just a tight whisper and a meat spot 2 blocks from the address. He handed me a fat envelope without looking me in the eye and said the 3 things that stuck. "After dark only. Doors already open. Don't go upstairs." He smelled like wet wool. He didn't wait for questions. By the time I told Luis and Dom what he'd said, the guy had already crossed the lot and vanished behind a line of hedges like he'd been walking somewhere else the whole time. The house was a 1950s 2-story at the end of a cul-de-sac that felt like a room no one cleaned. Streetlights buzzed. Mailboxes leaned. Every front yard had a little white rock border except this one, which had none. The porch light was on. The front door stood ajar by an inch, as if it had been waiting with its mouth open. There were details that didn't line up. The utilities were off according to our job sheet, but the porch light worked. There was no car in the driveway, but 2 rectangular clean patches in the grime said there always had been until recently. The welcome mat was new and crisp compared to everything around it. We stepped inside and the temperature dropped a degree. Thermal, not dramatic, but everyone felt it in their teeth. The first thing I noticed, the smell of sliced apples and laundry detergent, not the stale air foreclosures get. On the hall table, 3 keys sat on a dish, each tagged with masking tape and block letters: garage, basement, keep. Every clock ticked. There were 5 of them, 1 in the hall, 2 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, and a tiny gold travel clock on a bookshelf. All ticked in the same clean rhythm, but the hands didn't move. They sat at 2:19 like a museum exhibit of time. Creepy, Dom said, but he said it to his shoes. The living room was staged like people lived there last night. Throw blanket folded. Remote lined up with the TV. A glass with a little ring of water and 2 lip prints sat on a coaster. I touched it. Room temperature. On the far wall, family photos faced the plaster. The frames had been turned around like misbehaving children. On the mantel, a calendar still hung on June 12 years ago, and someone had X'd out the days up to the 14th with a pen that had bled through. Then the neighbor caught us. He came up the front walk in a cardigan and bright white sneakers, hands up like he was approaching a skittish dog. "You can't," he said through the open door. "No one's supposed to be in there. Not since," he glanced at the house like it could hear him. "Not since the incident." Luis asked, "What incident?" The man looked over his shoulder at the dark windows of the houses across the street as if they could sprout ears. "They sealed it," he said. "They said the bank owned it. It's been 12 years. We keep our blinds closed at night." He peered past me, over my shoulder, and his face adjusted into something like pity. "You don't want to be in there after." He didn't finish. He backed away, palms still up. "You didn't hear it from me," he added, which was funny because he hadn't told us anything. We had money in an envelope and 3 men on a clock. We loaded. Dining chairs, a dresser that fought us, a box of books about herbs and old cookery, 3 tubs of kid toys that squeaked when you touched the lid. The kitchen had a bowl of fruit on the island. Every apple had a small brown bite taken out of it, like someone had taste tested each one and put it back. The fridge hummed. When I opened it, a cold light came on and reflected off glass bowls of gelatin, perfectly level like red lakes. The milk carton had the old design from a decade ago. The date on the top was 12 years old. The milk was white. Dom cracked open the freezer and shut it fast. "Don't," he said, and the way he didn't look at me made me not ask. Later, I would think about how the cold had rolled out across his face like a hand. We were halfway through when the footsteps started. Upstairs. A slow, patient weight over our heads, heel-toe, the pause of a person listening between steps. We froze in the living room with our hands on a couch we hadn't moved yet. The sound crossed above us, headed toward the front of the house, stopped above the entry hall where I stood. "You hear that?" Dom whispered needlessly. Luis didn't look up. "We keep moving," he said, but his voice was the voice you use for animals. We kept moving. Every time we set something down, the footsteps started again. When we lifted again, they stopped. In the hall, a framed mirror had been covered in brown paper and taped at the edges as if someone had gift-wrapped a hole. Across the paper, written in black marker in a slanted hand, "Turn around later." There was scratching from behind the paper, a light, deliberate fingernail sound. None of us touched the tape. We carried the couch out. The porch boards creaked under our weight, and then creaked again after we stepped off them, as if someone behind us had stepped gently in the same places. At the truck, the ramp clanged and echoed up the block. A few windows on the street brightened. On the truck bed, condensation had formed on the metal like breath on a mirror. I wiped a line through it without thinking. The line filled back in. Back inside, the kitchen had changed in a way that took a beat to notice. The knife block had one less knife. The empty slot faced us like an expression. On the counter, a faint wet outline lay where metal had been. Luis checked the floor without meaning to. No knife. "Let's be done," he said. We went faster. The faster we moved, the more the house felt like it breathed, air shifting to accommodate us, the refrigerator hum bending to a lower note, and then higher again like a throat clearing. We were almost finished when Dom made a sound I didn't know he had. He was looking at the doorway to the stairs. The carpet there was light beige, the kind that holds footprints days after you walk on it. A set of wet impressions had appeared on the top step. Not shoe prints. Bare feet. They were turned sideways like someone was standing just around the corner, getting ready to come down. After 3 heartbeats, a footprint appeared on the next step down. It didn't stamp into existence. It darkened from nothing to wet like film developing. One. Then the next. The pace was unhurried and certain. Whoever owned them knew the stairs, knew the squeaks, knew where to put weight. The prints stopped at the landing and then continued on the runner, toward us. We backed up as they approached, couched between us like a shield, until the prints reached the hall and then ended 6 inches from the toes of my boots. The air in front of me was colder than the air behind my neck. It felt like standing at the cliff edge of a high place. Dom whispered without meaning to. We said we'd leave the door open. I didn't know he remembered the house sitter's instructions until that moment. We had left it open. The door moved anyway, slowly, as if someone's wrist pressed the edge from the inside. It stayed on the latch, not clicking shut, just almost. The porch light brightened, then the bulb inside made a dry ping and went dark. The clock still ticked 2:19. We loaded the last boxes without looking down. We slid the couch into the truck in one motion that scraped my knuckles and tore my glove. Luis yanked the ramp, and it bounced and rattled like something fleeing. I latched the door fast. In the cab, my throat was raw like I'd been shouting even though I hadn't. Luis turned the key and the engine did its best impression of a heart attack before catching. We rolled forward 2 feet and stopped. There were footprints on the windshield. 2 wet prints at chest height, pressed from the inside out, soles, toes, the whirl of a small scar beneath the ball of the right foot. They didn't run down like rain. They stayed exactly where they were as if the glass remembered pressure. "I didn't lock the house," I said. "Don't go back," Luis said. We drove. The prints dried without fading, leaving the suggestion of something that wanted to be remembered. At the yard, I tried to log the job, but the system refused the address. Error blinked where the street should have been, like the house was rejecting being written down. I wrote the client as cash and left the name blank. When I opened the envelope to count before drop, the bills were damp and cold as if they'd come out of a pocket. Tucked into the last stack was a Polaroid of a front hallway with a mirror covered in brown paper. On the paper someone had written "Turn around now." You could see, in the warp of the film, the suggestion of a figure behind the paper, shoulders unequal, head tilted. That night, my phone pinged a voicemail from an unknown number. I played it once. A man's voice, half breath, half laughter, saying, "Don't lock me out. Don't lock me out. Don't lock me." Before the line broke in a burst of kitchen static, the sound of a refrigerator door being closed and opened, closed and opened. I blocked the number. The next morning, the truck's back latch had mud on it in the shape of a hand that had tried the handle. On the ramp, 5 parallel wet lines like toes had slid. We didn't take night jobs for a while. When we did again, it was because money leans on you. Some cul-de-sacs still feel like rooms no one cleaned. Some porch lights are too bright. Once in a while, after dark, we hear footsteps above us where there's no upstairs, and we work faster, not because we're brave, but because something is always coming down the stairs, and we promised someone we never met that we wouldn't lock the door.